how Chiluba and his MMD government betrayed the workers. Fellow Zambian citizens, compatriots, and the Zambian proletariat, it is not part of our culture or tradition to speak ill of those that have gone before us or died. Yet, somewhere in one of the plays by Shakespeare are the famous lines by one of the characters who lamented, "I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him, for the evil that men do lives after them." In this address, I promise the Zambians and the workers and the proletariat one thing: never to suffer from aposiopesis, which is defined in the dictionary as the device of suddenly breaking off in the middle of a sentence as if unwilling to continue. I will speak frankly about those very painful and evil decisions that the MMD government under Chiluba's watch took, resulting in the many deaths, and that is prematurely, of innocent workers, untold miseries, destitution, and irreparable damage to their families for generations to come. I will also do justice to him by acknowledging he was a most brilliant and astute trade union leader, unequaled perhaps, but I loathe and detest his role as a politician. Under his presidency, the workers of this country faced a most reactionary and brutal regime that sent them to their early deaths, occasioned by the ill-fated Economic Structural Adjustment Program, ESAP, and the resultant privatization of state-owned enterprises. We are concerned with Chiluba's actions in the MMD government because his rise to power in early 1990s was as a result of the 28th July 1989 Workers' Revolution, of which we were part and parcel of. That revolution was later hijacked by propertied bourgeois and fake bourgeois elements who had surrounded him and had nothing to do with the workers' cause. For example, over 7,000 workers lost jobs between January and October 1995 from 310 companies as a result of the Structural Adjustment Program. According to Bank of Zambia 1995 annual report, the highest job losses occurred in the transport, manufacturing, wholesale, retail, and financial sectors of the economy. The report stated that the liquidation of the United Bus Company of Zambia, UBZ, a public corporation, and 3 commercial banks contributed significantly to the rate of redundancies and unemployment. Darlington Banda, writing in his monogram, The Trade Union Situation in Zambia, an overview of law, practice, and way forward, makes the following observations, and I quote: "When Economic Structure Adjustment Program, ESAP, started to be implemented in earnest in 1992, the laws relating to liquidation, minimum standards, and employment were those dating back to the colonial era. The introduction and subsequent implementation of ESAP did not involve the participation of the labor movement at the policy design or delivery levels, although in theory, the law established a tripartite consultative labor council where such important issues could be discussed. As a result of rushed implementation of ESAP without regard to social as well as legal safety mechanisms to ensure that the law was in line with the changed economic circumstances, retrenched employees were faced with totally unrealistic and unbearable conditions for loss of employment. For instance, Under the archaic law on liquidation, a former employee could only be entitled to 200 kwacha. I repeat, 200 kwacha, which was about 50 cents of the American dollar at the time, an amount which could hardly buy such an employee even a bottle of Coca-Cola. He concludes, under these conditions, the labor movement was and continued to be helpless because of a technical hitch that retrenched former employees were no longer in employment, therefore capable of being negotiated for. Therefore, such former employees were at the mercy of the state. Unquote. Fellow Zambian citizens, compatriots, and the proletariat. In Ghana, by comparison, the government took a number of steps to deal with its substantial liabilities for end-of-service benefits to retrenched workers. Such steps included the introduction of a national pension scheme to replace the inadequate retirement packages, a revision of the relevant laws on collective bargaining, employer responsibility and social security, as well as the creation of an institutional arrangement to oversee the social cost of adjustment. Unlike Chiluba, who, as a trade union leader, had understood and mastered the trade union as a special school for the development of pragmatic leadership for the emancipation of the workers' socio-economic and political needs, the leaders who took over from him at the Zambia Congress of Trade Unions, ZCTU, were ideologically not well prepared for the new challenges. They failed to recognize the global changes taking shape concerning the devaluation of the ideology based on solidarity, the international economic crisis, along with persistent high rates of unemployment at the time. With the emergence of the belief during this time of privatization as a magic wand and in the market economy as a slogan or magic cement able to fix or save everything, these challenges demanded a new reorientation by the trade unions, including the introduction of more pragmatic systems, greater decentralization, and increased investment in leadership training. The case for Zambia is that the economy was being radically restructured while the trade unions remained static in their old ways and therefore could not cope with the new challenges. This was a grave and fatal mistake and played directly in the hands of Chiluba and his MMD government. For indeed, it was Chiluba who told the nation and boasted openly, even as the workers died in silence and despair, that he was dearly in love with ASAP and kissed the adjustment program in the morning, at lunch, and at dinner. Yes, indeed, the workers' movement, through their leaders, played complicit with the hostile Chiluba regime and should share the blame for letting down the workers and their revolution, which they are seeking to reinstitute through the Progressive Labour Congress, P.L.C, the Progressives, a political party which is fully committed to the workers' rehabilitation and compensation come 2026. Vote Labour. Where Chiluba talked integral trade unionism as a result of his well-grounded revolutionary and social thought, derived from East Germany Red Flag Trade Union School, Faxon Shamenda, his anointed successor, who had stepped in his shoes at the ZCTU, remained stuck in revisionism and reformism, typical of the English Trade Union School. Consider what he had to say in an interview he gave to the Africa South and East magazine in May 1993, and I quote, "We had preoccupied ourselves with the fight for democracy and multi-party politics, which we won. Now, we want to concentrate on bread and butter issues, unquote. With that submissiveness and resignation, truly in the style of Pilate, the Roman emperor, who handed Jesus to Jews to be crucified, Shamenda handed the workers to Chiluba, who took them to the famous hill of Golgotha to be crucified for the single and sole sin that they had committed of having made it possible for him to attain the most coveted prize of the Republican presidency. Akashambatwa Mbikusita Lewanika, that most distinguished scholar and son of this nation and founder member of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD, addressing participants at the ZCTU Symposium on the theme, The Role of Workers in MMD's Program of National Reconstruction and Development Through Democracy, made this timely warning, which Shamenda and his labor aristocrats chose to ignore. And I quote again, "In many ways, the role of organized labor shall be, as it has always been, dependent upon how unions meet the challenge of constituting, organizing, and operationalizing themselves into positive forces and agents for the protection and promotion of workers' interests. This challenge is first and foremost an internal organization task to democratize the organization and functions of trade union affairs. This challenge is a matter of a prudent nationalist advocacy of workers' interests at the places they work and in communities they live in harmony with the workers' broader and long-term advantage as members of the national and international family of humanity. This challenge can be addressed through organizational activities in the political party arena. Again, I want to repeat that. This challenge, he says, can be addressed through organizational activities in the political party arena with trade unions as affiliate or independent political actors. In a democratic regime, whether or not unions act as independent party political organizations or as affiliate party political agents or even as political associations, must be a matter of free individual and collective choice. Unquote. During the New Deal government of the MMD, led by President Levi Patrick Manawasa, Shamenda of the ZCTU on one hand, and Joyce Nonde of the FFTUZ on the other, sought to pay heed and attention to these wise words by Akashambatwa. They both announced they would back a political party of their choice after scrutinizing the respective party manifestos. That talk died a natural death, and once again, the workers were left with no sense of direction, perhaps because there was no agreed common agenda for the workers. So they lost the opportunity to influence the outcome of the election and all the attendant social and economic policies of the government of the day. Fellow Zambian citizens, compatriots, and Zambian proletariat, the MMD was and is still a bourgeois-oriented political party, and so serves, like the UPND, the interests of propertied class and allied strata, to the exclusion of workers, peasants, and the proletariat at large. What the workers' movement failed to grasp then, and perhaps now, is that any political system always served and continues to serve the interests of the class that is in control, that controls the means of production. I repeat, what the workers' movement failed to grasp then and perhaps now is that any political system always served and continued to serve the interests of certain classes and strata, those which rule in the economic sphere and own the major means of production. Listen to what Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, that most distinguished and unequaled Russian revolutionary leader, had to say regarding the position and mission of the workers' movement in a class. And I quote, "People always have been foolish victims of deception and self-deception in politics, and they always will be until they have learned to seek out the interests of some class or other behind all moral, religious, political, or social phrases, declarations, and promises." Unquote. And so, the incessantly repeated contention that bourgeois parties express supra-class or national interests have never been proved in real political practice. This is, in fact, impossible, and in view of the directly opposing position and goals of the wealthy on one hand, and the multi-million-strong army of hard workers and peasants on the other. Only very naive people can believe in the convergence of their interests and in the possibility of equal protection of both classes by the bourgeois parties and their state. Fellow Zambians, compatriots, and the proletariat, no one can defy the laws of history. Every people have their own historical and peculiar conditions of development, but they are only the specific national forms in which the general objective social laws operate. It is impossible to put the clock back, to return to the past, or to turn the past into the future. As a mature, independent state, Zambia at 60 years, it should absolutely become clear that the economic and cultural legacy of imperialism is a drag on national development and reconstruction. To uphold our sovereignty and put an end to neo-colonialism, it is necessary to back up our political freedom with economic independence. As a free state, indeed, we must begin to build our own independent economy, and this inevitably leads us to question which path to follow, whether capitalist or non-capitalist. But what do we know already about capitalism? To the propertied and privileged few in our society, it means wealth upon wealth, accumulation upon accumulation, while to the mass of our people, it means grinding poverty, ruthless exploitation, and premature death due to starvation. The domestic upper crust of the bourgeoisie in our society exploits the workers and the peasants alike in no less than the foreign capitalists, and it links its own interests with those of foreign capital, the transnational monopolies, and the neo-colonialism. The capitalist way thus legitimizes economic dependency, with the result that colonialism is revived. So Zambians must be wary and look out as we call for foreign investment and capital, because it is not all gold that glitters. This mode of development should be rejected by voting Labour in the 2026 presidential and general elections. In the next address, the Progressive Labour Congress, P.L.C, the Progressives, will be sharing and discussing the foundations of an alternative development model for Zambia. Be on guard. Fellow Zambians, compatriots, workers, and the proletariat, the gospel quotes in the book of St. James reads, "Temptation arises when a man is enticed and lured away by his own lust. Then lust conceives and gives birth to sin. And sin, full grown, breeds death." Unquote. It is possible some leaders in the workers' movement could have been compromised and therefore could have received positive sanctions or the famous brown envelopes during the Chiluba era. These leaders were responsible for betraying the workers through contributory negligence. As a result, the workers, through contributory negligence, suffered immensely. The leaders were accomplices to the deaths and destruction of these families. They had power and influence to checkmate Chiluba and his government, but they chose not to do so because they relied on Chiluba's goodwill, perhaps as a former labor leader. For instance, they could have bargained with the government of the day to spare or preserve some of those state-owned enterprises which were privatized, to be transferred into the hands of the workers themselves as cooperatives, thereby saving jobs and lives. Fellow Zambians, my compatriots and workers and peasants and the proletariat, the Progressive Labour Congress, P.L.C., the Progressives, is offering an exceptional platform and opportunity to the workers' movement, embracing the peasant farmers, the student, youth and women movements, the cooperative movement, and all allied strata, to take a firm stand as a proletarian class, to be part of a political transformative force that will bring about real change in Zambia, in the general socio-economic setup of our country. Revolutionary transformation of society is impossible unless conformism in the workers' movement is overcome or discarded. And by conformism is meant the passive acceptance of the existing order of things, prevailing opinions, failure to form one's own opinion, unprincipled and uncritical following of whatever exerts the greatest influence. That is, opinion of the majority, acknowledged authority, and traditional, etc. The social roots of conformism in the workers' movement, and this is very dangerous, can be traced to the non-proletarian pet bourgeois opportunistic views and trends that are the hallmark of the ideology and practical activities of English trade unionism and the teachings of Eduard Bernstein, the leader of the German Social Democrats. The teachings concern: 1. A striving to limit the workers' struggle to the tasks and forms of an economic fight against the factory or company owners. That is reformism. 2. Denial of the fact that the interests of the proletariat are directly opposed to the interests of the bourgeoisie. Withdrawal from the fight for the fundamental socialist interests and aims of the proletariat as a class, and the preaching of neutrality, that is, non-intervention in political activities. That's what we call revisionism. 3. A narrow shop structure of the trade union organization as a closed corporation, which greatly hindered the association of the broader masses of the working people in unions. Corporatism. Fellow Zambian citizens, the members of the proletariat, and my dear compatriots, the above views and teachings underline and portray the opportunist, social reformist trend in the working class and trade union movement, which were chiefly responsible for blinding Shamenda's ZCTU and known as FFTUZ, which revealed glaring weakness, workers' weakness and helplessness in their struggle against Chilubas' neoliberal policies adopted in the 1990s by his government. The lesson learned is that the workers and other progressive strata, the proletariat, should never traverse that road again. The workers and the proletariat have one choice to make: to affiliate and be part of the Progressive Labour Congress, P.L.C, the progressives, the vanguard and the only staunchly pro-Labour party in Zambia. And together, come in 2026, we can change Zambia forever.